What happened on that quiet Thursday morning inside ITV studios would soon become one of the most talked-about moments in British television. Sir Michael Caine, the living legend, the man whose voice had carried through decades of cinema history, walked into the Lorraine show expecting nothing more than a simple chat. At 89, he had been through countless interviews, some cheerful, some emotional, but all respectful. That morning, he was there to promote his latest film, share a few laughs, and maybe reflect on his long journey from the streets of South London to international fame. The crew greeted him warmly. Lights were adjusted, microphones clipped on, and cameras stood ready. Lorraine Kelly, known for her cheerful charm and friendly tone, welcomed him with that signature smile she wore on every episode. "It's always such a pleasure having you here, Michael," she said. He nodded politely, his usual calm, gentlemanly demeanor shining through. To the audience, it looked like another feel-good segment, Britain's favorite host talking to Britain's favorite actor. But underneath that polished surface, something subtle was off. Lorraine's tone carried a different edge that morning, a mix of curiosity and something sharper. The first few questions were harmless: his career, his health, his love for storytelling. Michael answered with grace, speaking of old London streets, hard beginnings, and the values that shaped him. Then came a pause. Lorraine leaned forward slightly and said, "Michael, after all your fame and fortune, do you still feel connected to those old working-class roots you always talk about?" It was an innocent question, or so it seemed. But before he could respond fully, she interrupted with a half-smile and added, "Because, sometimes it feels a bit theatrical when you mention it." The atmosphere changed instantly. The warmth in the studio faded, replaced by quiet tension. Michael Caine, the man who had faced tougher critics and harsher crowds in his youth, simply looked at her, not with anger, but with disappointment. No one in that studio yet realized it, but that single exchange was the spark. The next few minutes would turn a casual morning show into a national controversy, one that would leave Lorraine Kelly speechless and Michael Caine walking away with his head held high. Lorraine's words hung in the air like a chill no one expected. The crew shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to a break. But Michael Caine didn't move. He adjusted his glasses slowly, leaned forward, and said calmly, "Theatrical? My dear, there's nothing theatrical about surviving." That single line carried decades of pain and pride. Lorraine tried to brush it off with a laugh, saying, "Oh, don't take it that way, Michael. I just mean you've done so well. Maybe it's time to move on from all that." He stared at her, eyes steady. "You don't move on from where you come from," he said. "You learn from it. You honor it." For a moment, the audience watching at home could feel the tension rise through the screen. Lorraine, still smiling but clearly unsettled, tried to regain control. She shifted topics, but her voice trembled slightly. Michael had struck a nerve, not just with her but with every person who ever felt looked down upon for their roots. That's when the interview turned from polite conversation to a quiet confrontation, one that no one on set was prepared to handle. Lorraine tried to smooth things over, but her tone betrayed her frustration. She gave a forced smile and said, "Well, I suppose everyone has their sob stories, don't they?" The words slipped out too fast, too casually, and instantly the room froze. Michael Caine blinked slowly, almost as if giving her one last chance to realize what she'd just said. But she didn't. Instead, she chuckled awkwardly, glancing at the crew for support. No one moved. The silence was louder than anything that could have been said. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice low, calm, but with an unmistakable edge of truth. "Those sob stories, Lorraine, are real lives. People who worked 16 hours a day just to put bread on the table. My mother scrubbed floors. My father worked the docks. That's not a performance. That's survival." Lorraine shifted in her chair, suddenly realizing she had crossed a line. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down. Yes, but you're not that person anymore, Michael. You're Sir Michael Caine now, an icon. Don't you think people get tired of hearing about the struggle? He looked at her, eyes full of something deeper than anger, disappointment. If people get tired of hearing about struggle, he said, then they've forgotten what made this country what it is. The control in his tone silenced the entire studio. It wasn't a shouting match. It was a lesson in humility, taught by a man who had lived through the kind of hardship most only read about. Lorraine tried to smile again, but it came off hollow. In that moment, everyone watching could see it clearly. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a clash of values, privilege versus perseverance, comfort versus conviction. Lorraine leaned back, clearly uncomfortable but still trying to maintain control. "Michael," she said with a forced laugh, "let's not turn this into class warfare." That was the final straw. Michael Caine looked at her, calm, composed, and heartbreakingly honest. "Class warfare?" he repeated. "No, Lorraine. This is about respect, the kind you seem to have forgotten." His words sliced through the tension like a blade. The studio crew exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or keep filming. Lorraine tried to diffuse the moment with a smile, but it faltered. The mask of television charm had finally cracked. Michael leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "You don't understand where I came from," he said quietly. "Because you don't want to." There was no shouting, no theatrics, just truth. The kind of truth that leaves no room for argument. He removed his microphone, placed it gently on the table, and stood up. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of his dignified silence. Lorraine sat frozen, her words caught somewhere between shock and regret. For the first time, the host who always had something to say had nothing. Michael Caine stood tall, his presence commanding even in silence. The audience at home watched as he straightened his jacket, looked around the studio one last time, and said softly, "This isn't about my film. It's about basic human respect. No anger, no dramatics, just pure, controlled disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than any argument ever could." Lorraine tried to speak, but her voice trembled. "Michael, please, she began, but he was already walking away. Every step he took echoed through the studio like a statement, steady, deliberate, final. The cameras stayed on him as he reached the stage exit, paused, and turned slightly. "Never forget where you come from," he said before disappearing behind the curtain. The studio remained completely silent. Lorraine looked down, eyes glassy, her usual confidence gone. The crew stood frozen, knowing they had just witnessed something far bigger than an awkward interview. Within hours, clips of the moment flooded social media. People called it the day Michael Caine reminded Britain what class truly means. And for millions watching, his quiet walkout wasn't just defiance, it was dignity in motion. Michael Caine's walkout wasn't about pride, it was about principle. In a world where fame often silences truth, he chose respect over reputation. His words reminded Britain that real class isn't measured by wealth or titles, but by how you treat others, no matter their past. If you believe dignity still matters, share this story. Let it reach every person who's ever been told to move on from where they came from. Because the moment we forget our roots, we forget who we truly are. Remember the real Britain. Remember Michael Caine.